Welcome back to another episode of the Ohio College Tech Prep Podcast. My name is Matt Cola, and I am the Tech Prep Coordinator at Kent State University out of the Northeast Ohio region. This month's episode is an interview with Jacob Duritsky from Team Neo. So thanks so much for joining me today, Jacob.
Matt, thanks for having me.
As we get started, can you just introduce yourself, tell me a little bit more about Team Neo and about your role in the organization?
Yeah, happy to do it. So Jacob Duritsky, like you said, I am Vice President of Strategy, Research, and Talent for Team Neo. For folks not familiar, Team Neo is a regional economic development group. We cover multiple counties in Northeast Ohio, but, for the purposes of your audience, think about the major markets of Cleveland, Akron, and Canton that we really represent, which ends up being, in many ways, about a third of the state's economy. So a meaningful part of the economy. And, at its highest level, regional economic development is all about helping companies who are here grow and thinking about creative solutions and strategic ways that we can help companies grow. And certainly one of the most important ways we can do that is helping them to find, source, and prepare the most and best trained talent that we can. As a part of being a regional economic development group through Team Neo, we are also the Jobs Ohio partner. So Jobs Ohio is the statewide economic development group. Interesting, sort of a privatized, a nonprofit model in Ohio, different than a lot of states, but a very sustainable funding stream because it is funded through liquor profits. So unlike a lot of states, which use general revenue and taxes, Jobs Ohio's model actually uses state liquor sales. So very sustainable, but allows them to make strategic investments in things like talent that can help our companies be competitive. When we sort of think about the work that I do, and the work that the strategy, research, and talent team does, half of that's helping companies to grow, but half of that is outreach to higher education, convening some of our higher education partners, working with colleges to empower them with data and insight so that they're talking particularly to students, not just about a degree, but about the job that exists after the degree. I mentioned that talent's imperative for companies. 91% of companies last year said talent was the biggest challenge to growth. So it's a real issue here in the region.
Absolutely. So you talked a lot about the work you do with specific companies. This episode kind of focuses on our regional industrial needs and what's up and coming in the industries. What are the current major industries and employment trends within those industries in the region?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll start with what I would call kind of the core challenge and opportunity for the region. And we've produced now for 7 years a study called Aligning Opportunities. And Aligning Opportunities is a regional report that looks at the talent gaps that exist in the market. And what that's found now consistently is that there are 3 areas of the economy that tend to have underproduction of talent relative to our company's needs. Those areas are manufacturing, healthcare, and IT and technology, say even STEM more broadly speaking. And there's a variety of reasons for each of those. Healthcare, very, very strong set of healthcare institutions in Northeast Ohio, right? Globally, things like the Cleveland Clinic. And that means significant demand for those workers. Registered nursing now for 7 years straight has been the number one hardest to fill position in the region. When you look at manufacturing, lots and lots of job openings in manufacturing in a sector of the economy that we haven't really pushed young people towards for a while now. So what you're seeing in manufacturing is that there are great jobs in machining and welding and other areas of the manufacturing economy, but that a lot of that labor force is starting to age out. They tend to be older than the economy on average. And a lot of them are projected now in the next 5 to 10 years to retire. So replacing that workforce becomes critically important. And then when you look at technology and STEM, a lot of people look at our economy and say, we're not Silicon Valley, we're not San Francisco or Boston, but what we do have is huge professional services, headquarters, insurance, finance here, all of which require tremendous technology. And so when we look at the gaps in the technology jobs, it's often coming from a lot of our corporate headquarters and professional services firms, which is part of the conversation we try to have with young people. If you go to University of Akron or Kent or Case Western and you get a computer science degree, doesn't mean you have to leave for San Francisco. You can work at Progressive, which is a technology company that sells insurance, right? So we see those trends that are kind of core, but what we're seeing increasingly, and particularly in this market, is looking out over the next 5 to 7 years, really with an eye toward 2030, Areas like behavioral health are increasingly important. Areas like teaching and education, where we're seeing a lot of people leaving the labor force in big numbers and not replacing those from a variety of reasons, right? But even areas like community support, as an organization, we focus on a lot of trade and sector export-based companies. But just, local security and public safety, police forces, right, are seeing declines in a lot of places. So it's starting now to think about more robustly outside of those industries. Where else do we see a niche going forward?
Great. Thank you. It kind of answered my next couple questions.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no, it's helpful. Thank you. What sort of training or skills do employers from these industries expect incoming employees to have, especially incoming employees coming out of CTE programs, but in general?
Yeah. Out of CTE programs, I would say where we see a ton of alignment tends to be relative to some of that manufacturing production sector that we've seen. But increasingly, I would say in the technology space, too. I'm going to sort of take CTE out of it and think about short-term credentialing more broadly, right? Coding boot camps have become a real alternative to a bachelor's degree for a lot of companies. In the pandemic, forced that hand a little bit, right? You didn't look for a degree, you looked for a skill set. And I think increasingly, if you want to find a silver lining in the pandemic, some of it is that companies are starting to source elements of talent differently than they have in the past. Very true as we think about the technology and the IT landscape. Certainly, increasingly, what we're trying to show, particularly young people, is that these production careers we talk so much about, you can often start them as seniors in high school, right, and get a foot in the door. I was just talking to a company out in Lorain County who is starting to employ seniors in high school in sort of a, like an internship type program. And they're paying these folks like $26 an hour to start.
Wow.
Right. $26 an hour with guaranteed placement when they graduate school. Mm-hmm. For an individual, $26 an hour is far above the family sustaining wage threshold for one person. And that something like within 2 years guaranteed to be above 30. So these are great job opportunities that don't require as much training, where we think a lot of families, parents, students, educators even still, where the challenge lies is starting to have these conversations at an early enough point in time that people can make educated decisions about it, right? Yeah, I don't know about you. When I was 20 years ago, graduating high school, it was, what degree do you want? Which college are you going to go to? No one talked to me about the career path. No one talked to me about different ways to think about it. You were either in auto tech or you weren't.
Right.
So it was a very different type of conversation. So, a lot of this work that we're doing, that Lorain County conversation I was talking to the Lorain County Joint Vocational Services, the JVS out there. We're trying to have it at a younger and younger point in time so that we can really influence that. And to bring it full circle back to your original question, because a lot of places aren't just requiring a 4-year degree anymore. And that's really, really important to share, particularly with young people. So where it does become a requirement, register nursing, right? I mean, you need a specific degree and specific set of skills. But we just heard from Metro Health last week. Metro Health preferred a bachelor's in nursing. Right now, they will take a 2-year nursing degree. And what they'll now do is, rather than requiring it, they will pay for your education to go and finish, right? So they'll try to incent you to do it. But the market has changed dramatically. And getting to this level of depth with young people in particular, look, I have a 22-year-old who's graduating from Kent State in May and heading out to grad school, and she's a psychology major, but fully understood that for what she wanted to do, grad school was the path she was on. I've got a 9-year-old who's, like a YouTuber. So we're still working on those conversations, but trying to think through these issues at a younger point in time, because the labor market looks very different than it did even 10 or 20 years ago.
Absolutely. So how can Team NEO assist our educators to ensure that their students are well prepared for the workforce when they graduate?
Yeah, so we do a few things, some more formal than others. I would say the number one way that folks who will listen to this should think about Team NEO and think about the team I'm representing, Strategy Research Talent, is we have a wealth of data. If you're having a conversation, I don't care whether you're talking to a junior in high school or a junior in college, and this person, we just had this example happen to us actually, this person is an English major and a creative writing major. and is struggling to find job opportunities after going through 4 years of school, reach out to us. We have lots of data. We have lots of insights we can provide about companies that are hiring. Skill transferability. Yeah, you're a creative writing major and an English major. Have you thought about technical writing and scientific writing? Have you thought about grants as a place? Expanding the way people think, where you can continue to build what you want to do while honing your craft, right? So that's the simplest way. Think of us as a resource to give you the data that can empower your conversations. Far more formally, we have a program broadly called Connections to Careers. We go into educational institutions and we work with their advising staff, all of their faculty, in some cases their deans, to have market-based labor intelligence conversations with those folks. Right now, we're working with Cleveland State. We work with about 50 of their advisors and administrators, having conversations about how the degrees they're graduating translate into real jobs in the marketplace, skills they're looking for, companies that are hiring. We try to make it really, really dot connecting so that when these advisors are talking to those folks as sophomores or juniors, not just talking about what they're going to accomplish in their college career, but where the market is for them once they graduate. That for us is an incredibly important program. We've done it now with 5 higher education institutions throughout Northeast Ohio. That's a little more formal, requires more time, requires a bit of an investment, but is also the type of thing we can do if there are folks who want to have that level of a conversation.
Great. Thank you. My last question is a question that I ask everyone I interview because you're the expert, not me. Is there anything else you'd like to discuss or share with our listeners that I haven't already asked about?
Sure. The one thing I'll leave folks with, and I don't want to end on a down note, because I think there's lots of upside in the Northeast Ohio economy, lots of amazing training providers and amazing higher education institutions. But what I would say is, if you look at the reality of Northeast Ohio as a market, we've lost 150, 160,000 people the last couple of decades. We're an aging population. And what that all points to is, in the short term, if you think about jobs, if you think about GDP or some of the things in the economy that we care about, we're not just going to grow our way out of this. We have to think differently about the assets that we have here in place. So as we think about those in-demand areas of the economy, as we think about ways that we can connect more people to the workforce, more people means thinking differently about every community in Northeast Ohio, regardless of race, regardless of gender. Connecting people here who have been on the sidelines and marginalized to more opportunities that exist. Thinking differently about veterans in the workforce, workers with disabilities. The value proposition for how we find workers, how we connect people to work, thinking about wraparound services. In an economy like ours, particularly post-pandemic, that's highlighted a lot of these gaps, we have to be really, really creative about how we source talent and how we talk about opportunity. And if it doesn't start with who isn't in the labor market that wants to be and how do we connect them to a job, then in my view, we're not doing our job and there are too many people on the sideline. But outside of that, a little bit of the cautionary tale in the market. Lots of upside here, lots of amazing institutions doing lots of great work. And, there's a reason that we're doubling down on the investment that we make as economic developers in Northeast Ohio, because we see a lot of potential here.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to chat with me and create this podcast for our listeners. I am going to put your contact information in the episode description in case they want to reach out to you for anything we've discussed today.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate you having us on.
Thank you so much again to Jacob for taking time out of his day to interview with me. I also want to thank all of you for listening to this, our first season of the Ohio College Tech Prep Podcast. We're going to take a break for the summer from releasing episodes, but if you have any ideas for a future episode, please feel free to reach out to me at mcola@kent.edu or your local tech prep representative, and we will definitely reach out to get an interview scheduled with you. As usual, thank you so much for listening, and please feel free to rate us and review us on your favorite podcast of choice. Enjoy your summers.